The beginning of everything.
Let's discuss
Natalie
the
Harper
next
was
steps
17 when she
for the
first
project.
understood what it meant to feel your heart break and
This
soar at
this
the
part
same
here
time.
about love's quiet power,
She
it's
sat in the
exactly how I
third row
feel.
of Professor Vincent Ashford's literature class at Riverside Academy, her
I
notebook
love
filled with
you.
more observations about him than actual notes about the books they studied.
You know,
His
love
voice
isn't just a
carried through the
feeling,
classroom
it's
like a
journey we
gentle
all
river,
take in our own way.
steady and calming, turning words from dusty pages into living, breathing things. Vincent was 32 then, though Natalie thought he seemed ageless. He had a way of looking at students when they spoke that made them feel their words actually mattered. His brown hair fell slightly over his forehead when he leaned over desks to help with assignments, and his eyes held kindness that Natalie had rarely seen in adults. He wore simple clothes, cardigans over button-down shirts, and always carried the same worn leather satchel her father might have called vintage. The academy sat beside Mirror Lake, a place where students went to think or hide or simply exist away from expectations. Natalie went there every afternoon after class, sitting on the wooden dock with her journal open on her knees. She wrote about everything Vincent said, about the way he explained metaphors as if they were keys to understanding the entire universe, about how he smiled when someone finally grasped a difficult concept. The weight of unspoken words. Her best friend, Rachel Winters, knew about the feelings Natalie carried. Rachel was practical, the kind of person who solved problems with logic rather than emotion. She would sit beside Natalie on the dock, skipping stones across the water while Natalie wrote in her journal. "You know this cannot go anywhere," Rachel said one October afternoon, her voice gentle but firm. "He is your teacher, Natalie. He is a good man. He would never cross that line." Natalie nodded, watching the ripples spread across the lake's surface. "I know. I am not foolish. I just need to feel this, even if nothing comes from it. Does that make sense?" Rachel threw another stone, watching it skip 3 times before sinking. "It makes sense. But promise me you will not do anything that hurts you or him. Some feelings are meant to be private." But Natalie was 17, and 17-year-old hearts do not always listen to wisdom. They beat to their own rhythm, demanding to be heard, demanding to be seen. She told herself she would keep her feelings locked away, a secret she would carry until time turned them into a sweet memory. She almost succeeded. The letter that changed everything. Winter arrived early that year, bringing snow that transformed the academy into something from a storybook. Natalie made her decision on a Tuesday evening while sitting in the library. She would write Vincent a letter. Not to ask for anything, not to expect anything, but simply to tell the truth before she left for university in the spring. She needed him to know that someone saw him, truly saw him, and that his kindness had mattered. She wrote the letter over 3 nights, crossing out words and rewriting sentences until her hand cramped. She told him about the way his classes made her believe in beauty again after her mother's death 2 years earlier. She explained how his passion for stories had given her hope that the world still held magic. And yes, she confessed her feelings, but she did so with the understanding that nothing would come from them. She asked for nothing except that he know he had made a difference. Natalie left the letter on his desk before dawn on a Friday, tucked inside a copy of her favorite book. Then she went to the lake and sat on the dock, her heart pounding so hard she thought it might crack her ribs. The gentle truth. Vincent found her there during his free period. He sat beside her on the dock, the letter folded in his coat pocket. For a long moment, they both stared at the lake, watching the way the winter sun turned the ice at the edges into something crystalline and precious. "Natalie," he began, his voice carrying the same gentleness he used when discussing difficult poems. "I read your letter. I want you to know that I am deeply honored by your words. You are a remarkable young woman with a brilliant mind and a generous heart." She felt tears building behind her eyes but refused to let them fall. "I know you cannot feel the same way. I know the rules. I just needed to say it." Vincent smiled, though there was sadness in it. "The truth is more complicated than rules. You are my student, and I am your teacher. That creates a responsibility I take seriously. But beyond that, you are 17, Natalie. You are standing at the beginning of your life. In 6 months, you will leave for university. You will meet people your own age who challenge you and inspire you. You will fall in love properly, not with an idea of someone but with a person who can walk beside you through life. What if I already know what I want? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Then time will prove that true, he said. But you deserve the chance to discover who you are without the weight of feelings formed in a classroom. I care about you too much as your teacher, as someone who wants to see you thrive, to let you limit yourself to what you feel right now. The Promise by the Lake. Natalie understood. She hated that she understood, but she did. Vincent was protecting her in the only way he knew how, by being honest and kind even when it hurt. She took a deep breath, letting the cold air fill her lungs until they ached. "Can I ask you something?" she said. "Of course. If things were different, if I were not your student, if I were older, would you have felt differently?" Vincent stood, brushing snow from his coat. He looked at her with an expression she could not quite read. "Some questions are better left unanswered, Natalie. They lead down paths that serve no purpose except to cause pain. What I can tell you is this: you have a light in you. Do not let anyone, including me, dim that light. Go to university. Write your stories. Build your life. And if someday, many years from now, our paths cross again, we will see what time has made of us both." He walked back toward the academy, his footprints dark in the snow. Natalie sat on the dock until the sun began to set, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. She opened her journal and wrote a new promise, one meant only for herself. She would become someone extraordinary. She would build a life so full of purpose and passion that when she looked back on this moment, she would see it as the beginning of her story, not the end. 12 years later, that promise would bring her back to Mirror Lake, but not as the girl who dared to dream. She would return as the woman who made dreams real. And Vincent Ashford would be waiting, though neither of them knew it yet, the return. Natalie Harper stood in front of the floor-to-ceiling windows of her downtown office, watching the city lights flicker to life as evening settled over the skyline. At 29, she had built something most people only dreamed about. Harper Technologies had grown from a small startup in her university dorm room to a multi-million-dollar company specializing in educational software. Her programs were used in schools across the country, helping students learn in ways that felt natural and engaging. She had kept her promise to herself. After leaving Riverside Academy, she threw herself into computer science at Stanford, discovering a talent for coding that matched her love of storytelling. She learned to translate complex ideas into simple, beautiful interfaces. She worked 18-hour days, survived on coffee and determination, and slowly built a reputation as someone who understood how technology could serve humanity rather than replace it. The girl who once sat on a dock writing in her journal had become a woman featured in business magazines, invited to speak at conferences, courted by investors who saw gold in her vision. She dated occasionally, brief relationships with men who were impressive on paper but left her feeling hollow. Rachel, still her closest friend, joked that Natalie had impossibly high standards. Natalie never mentioned that her standards had been set 12 years ago by a literature professor who taught her what genuine kindness looked like. The invitation. The envelope arrived on a Wednesday afternoon, delivered by courier to her office. Cream-colored paper, formal script, the kind of invitation that demanded attention. The Riverside Academy Alumni Foundation cordially invited her to their annual charity gala, recognizing distinguished graduates who had made significant contributions to education. They wanted to honor her work, present her with an award, ask her to speak about her journey. Natalie held the invitation for a long time, her thumb tracing the embossed letters. She had not returned to Riverside since graduating. She sent donations, of course, generous checks that helped fund scholarships and library expansions. But she had never gone back in person. The memories felt too tender, too much like touching a bruise that had finally healed. "You should go," Rachel said that evening over dinner at their favorite restaurant. Rachel had become a successful architect, designing homes that balanced beauty with sustainability. She knew Natalie well enough to read the conflict in her silence. "It has been 12 years. You are not that 17-year-old girl anymore. You are Natalie Harper, the woman who changed educational technology. Go back and show them what you became." "What if he is there?" Natalie asked quietly. Rachel reached across the table and squeezed her hand. "Then he is there. And you will be gracious and professional and remember that you built an empire while he remained a teacher. You have nothing to fear from seeing Vincent Ashford again." But fear was not quite the right word for what Natalie felt. It was more like anticipation mixed with curiosity, the sense that some chapters only find their proper endings when you dare to read them again. The gala. The Riverside Academy Gymnasium had been transformed into something elegant. White lights hung from the ceiling like captured stars, round tables covered in dark blue linens filled the space, and a stage at the far end held a podium and microphone. Natalie arrived wearing a simple black dress that cost more than her entire wardrobe had in high school, her hair pulled back in a way that showed the confidence she had earned through years of proving herself in boardrooms full of men who underestimated her. She recognized faces from her past, people who had aged in the way everyone does, gaining weight or losing hair or developing the particular tiredness that comes from years of routine. Former classmates approached her with congratulations and questions about her success. Teachers she barely remembered hugged her and claimed they always knew she would do something special. She smiled and thanked them and felt like she was playing a role in a play she had not rehearsed for. Then she saw him. Vincent Ashford stood near the punch bowl, talking with the current headmaster. He had aged in a way that made him more handsome rather than less. His brown hair had threads of silver at the temples, and fine lines bracketed his eyes and mouth. He wore a simple dark suit that looked slightly worn at the elbows, the kind of thing a man wears when he cannot quite afford to replace it but refuses to look shabby. He still carried himself with that same quiet dignity she remembered, but there was something else now, something that looked like weariness. Their eyes met across the room. For a moment, everything else fell away. The noise of the gala faded into white static, and Natalie felt 17 again, her heart doing that same impossible dance between breaking and soaring. Then Vincent smiled, a small, genuine smile that held recognition and something that might have been relief, and the spell broke. The conversation. He came to her during the cocktail hour, after she had given her speech about the importance of making education accessible and inspiring. She had seen him in the audience, watching with the kind of attention he used to give to student presentations, and she had spoken partially to the room and partially to him, explaining how his classes had taught her that technology and humanity were not opposites but partners. "Natalie," he said, his voice exactly as she remembered it. "Congratulations on everything you have accomplished. Your speech was remarkable." "Thank you, Vincent," she replied, deliberately using his first name to remind herself she was not his student anymore. "It has been a long time." 12 years, he said. "Though I confess I have followed your career. The educational software you created, the way it adapts to different learning styles, it is brilliant. You took everything I tried to teach about meeting students where they are and made it real." They moved to a quieter corner, away from the crowd. Up close, Natalie could see the weariness more clearly. There were shadows under his eyes, and his suit, while clean and pressed, had the worn quality of something kept too long out of necessity rather than choice. "How have you been?" she asked. "Are you still teaching?" Vincent's smile turned rueful. "I am, though not at Riverside anymore. Budget cuts 5 years ago. I teach at the community college now, mostly night classes for adult learners. It is good work, meaningful work, but different from what I imagined my life would be." "And otherwise?" Natalie asked, keeping her voice neutral even as her heart beat faster. "Are you happy?" He paused, choosing his words carefully. I was married for 6 years. It ended 3 years ago. No children, thankfully, which made the divorce simpler if not easier. She wanted things I could not provide, stability and ambition that looked like traditional success. I think she married the idea of a professor and was disappointed when that idea came with a teacher's salary and a man who preferred books to networking. I am sorry, Natalie said, and meant it. Do not be. We were not right for each other. I think we both knew that but tried to force it to work anyway. That is the danger of marrying someone because it seems like the appropriate time rather than because you cannot imagine your life without them. He looked at her directly then, his eyes holding questions he did not voice. And you? Rachel mentioned you are quite successful. Are you happy? The question hung between them, larger than it seemed. Natalie thought about her office with its perfect view, her beautiful apartment that felt empty most evenings, the relationships that never quite took root because something always felt missing. I am successful, she said carefully. I built something I am proud of. I help students learn in ways that feel natural to them. I have proven that I can create value and meaning. But happy? I suppose I am still figuring out what that word means. The shift. They talked for hours that night, long after the gala ended and the cleanup crew began breaking down tables. They sat on the bleachers in the empty gymnasium, the same bleachers where Natalie used to sit during assemblies, and they spoke with the honesty that comes when enough time has passed to make old wounds interesting rather than painful. Vincent told her about his failed marriage, about the novel he had been trying to write for 8 years, about the way teaching night classes to adults who desperately wanted education felt more meaningful than anything he had done before. Natalie told him about building her company, about the loneliness that came with success, about how she sometimes still opened her old journal from high school and read the promises she had written to herself. Do you remember what you told me? Natalie asked as midnight approached. That day by the lake? You said if our paths crossed again years later, we would see what time had made of us. Vincent nodded slowly. I remember. I remember everything about that conversation. What do you see now? She asked, her voice steady despite her racing heart. He looked at her for a long moment, his expression serious. I see a woman who kept every promise she made to herself. I see someone who took heartbreak and turned it into fuel for creation. I see the person I hoped you would become, except better because you exceeded even my highest expectations. He paused, then continued quietly. And I see someone I never stopped thinking about, not once in 12 years, even when I tried to convince myself I had. The confession hung in the air between them, heavy with implications. Natalie felt something shift in her chest, like a door opening that she had kept locked for over a decade. I need to tell you something, Vincent said. That day by the lake, when you asked if things would be different if circumstances were different, I did not answer honestly. The truth is that I felt something even then, something inappropriate and frightening for a teacher to feel toward a student. That is why I had to be so firm, why I had to push you away. Not because I felt nothing, but because I felt too much and knew it was wrong. And now? Natalie asked, barely breathing. Now you are not my student. Now we are two adults who have lived separate lives and become who we were meant to be. Now there are no rules except the ones we choose to follow. He reached out and took her hand, his touch gentle and warm. Now I am terrified because I am 44 years old, I teach night classes at a community college, I drive a car that barely runs, and I have nothing to offer you except myself. And you are extraordinary, Natalie. You deserve someone equally extraordinary. Natalie felt tears building but refused to let them fall. She squeezed his hand, grounding herself in the reality of his presence. You taught me that worth is not measured by bank accounts or job titles. You taught me that what matters is how you treat people, how you inspire them, how you help them become better versions of themselves. You did that for me, Vincent. You are still doing it just by being who you are. They sat in silence for a moment, hands linked, 12 years of distance finally closing. Then Natalie smiled, the first genuine smile that had touched her face in longer than she could remember. "I think we should have dinner," she said. "A proper dinner, not at a gala or a school function. Just two people getting to know each other without the weight of the past hanging over everything." Vincent smiled back, and for the first time that evening, the weariness lifted from his eyes. "I would like that very much. Though I should warn you, my dinner budget is considerably more modest than yours." "Then I will pay," Natalie said firmly. "And you will let me without argument because this is what I want, and you taught me to always pursue what I want with courage." He laughed then, a real laugh that sounded like freedom. "I did teach you that, did not I? Very well. Dinner it is." They exchanged phone numbers, made plans for the following Saturday, and finally stood to leave. As they walked toward the parking lot, Natalie looked back at the academy building, dark now except for security lights. The girl she had been seemed very far away, but also somehow present, as if she had been waiting all these years for this moment when past and future could finally meet and make peace, the first real date. Saturday arrived with the kind of autumn weather that felt like a gift. The air was crisp but not cold, the sky clear and blue in a way that made everything seem possible. Natalie changed her outfit 3 times before settling on jeans and a soft sweater, something that felt like herself rather than the polished professional image she wore to board meetings. She wanted Vincent to see her, not the empire she had built. They met at a small Italian restaurant downtown, the kind of place with checkered tablecloths and candles in wine bottles. Vincent arrived first, standing outside with his hands in his pockets, looking nervous in a way that made Natalie's heart soften. He wore dark jeans and a button-down shirt under a jacket that had seen better days but was clean and pressed with obvious care. "You look beautiful," he said when she approached, the words simple and genuine. "You look good too," she replied, meaning it. There was something about Vincent that had nothing to do with expensive clothes or perfect grooming. He carried himself with integrity, and that made him handsome in a way that mattered more than surface appearance. Dinner stretched across 3 hours. They talked about books and technology, about the students Vincent taught who worked full-time jobs and came to class exhausted but determined. Natalie told him about the pressure of running a company, the constant demands from investors who wanted growth above all else, the way success sometimes felt like a trap she had built for herself. They laughed about memories from Riverside Academy, teachers who had seemed ancient but were probably younger than Vincent was now, the terrible cafeteria food, the way time had softened even difficult moments into something nostalgic. "I need to be honest with you," Vincent said as dessert arrived. "I am not the person you remember. That teacher you admired, he existed in a specific moment, a specific context. I am older now, more tired. I have failed at things. My marriage fell apart because I was not good at compromise. My novel sits unfinished because I am terrified it will not be good enough. I live in a small apartment with books stacked everywhere because I cannot afford proper shelves. I am not a fairy tale, Natalie." She reached across the table and took his hand. "I am not 17 anymore, Vincent. I am not looking for a fairy tale. I am looking for someone real, someone who understands that life is complicated and messy and still shows up anyway. You are that person. You have always been that person." The judgment. Their relationship began quietly, carefully, like two people learning a new language together. They went on walks around Mirror Lake, the place where everything had started. They attended small concerts at local venues, sharing observations about music and meaning. Vincent came to Natalie's apartment and was overwhelmed by the space, the view, the evidence of her success. She went to his small one-bedroom place and loved the chaos of books, the worn armchair by the window where he wrote, the simplicity that spoke of a life focused on what mattered rather than what impressed. But the world noticed. Rachel was supportive but worried. "People will talk," she warned over coffee one morning. "The age difference, the fact that he was your teacher, the disparity in your finances. Are you prepared for that?" "Let them talk," Natalie said with more confidence than she felt. I spent 12 years building something meaningful. I am not going to let other people's opinions stop me from being happy. But opinions came anyway, sharp and cutting. At a business conference, a colleague made a joke about Natalie's midlife crisis boyfriend, as if Vincent was a sports car she had purchased to prove something. An article in a local magazine about successful women in tech included a sidebar about her relationship, questioning whether someone of her stature should be dating a community college teacher. The comments section filled with people who had never met either of them making judgments about their motivations and character. Vincent struggled with it more than Natalie did. He was private by nature, uncomfortable with attention. One evening, after a particularly cruel article suggested he was using Natalie for her money, he showed up at her apartment looking defeated. "Maybe they are right," he said, pacing her living room. "Maybe this is selfish of me. You could be with someone who matches your success, someone who could stand beside you at events without people whispering. I am holding you back, Natalie. I am becoming a liability to your reputation." She stood and stopped his pacing, placing both hands on his face and forcing him to look at her. "Listen to me very carefully. I do not care what strangers think. I do not care about matching success or appearances or any of it. You are not holding me back. You are helping me remember why I built this life in the first place. It was never about money or recognition. It was about creating something meaningful. And you, Vincent Ashford, are the most meaningful thing in my life." He pulled her close then, holding her like someone afraid to let go. "I love you," he whispered against her hair. "I have loved you since you were 17 and I was terrified of that feeling. I love you now when I am allowed to say it and it still terrifies me because I could lose you." "You will not lose me," she promised. "Not to gossip, not to judgment, not to anything." The novel. Winter came early again that year, bringing snow that blanketed the city in white silence. Vincent's novel, the one he had been writing for 8 years, sat on his desk in a pile of marked-up pages. One evening, Natalie picked it up and began reading without asking permission. Vincent protested weakly, but she ignored him, curling up in his armchair with the manuscript. She read through the night while he pretended to grade papers but actually watched her, trying to gauge her reactions. The novel was beautiful, a story about a man who spent his life teaching others to find their voices while struggling to find his own. It was quiet and thoughtful and deeply human, the kind of book that would never be a bestseller but would change the lives of the few people who truly read it. "This is extraordinary," Natalie said as dawn light began filtering through the windows. "Vincent, this is really extraordinary. Why have you been hiding it?" He rubbed his face, exhausted. "Because it is not finished. Because I am afraid it is not good enough. Because putting it out into the world feels like exposing every vulnerable part of myself and inviting judgment." "So what?" Natalie said fiercely. "You taught me to be brave. You told me to pursue what I wanted with courage. Now I am telling you the same thing. This novel deserves to exist. Finish it. Let people read it. Stop hiding your light because you are afraid of what might happen if you shine." Something shifted in Vincent that night. He began writing again with the kind of focus that reminded Natalie of her early days building her company. He would come to her apartment after teaching his night classes and work at her dining table while she reviewed code or prepared presentations. They existed in comfortable parallel, two people pursuing their crafts in shared silence. 3 months later, Vincent typed the final words of his novel. Natalie opened a bottle of champagne she had been saving, and they toasted to completion, to courage, to the terrifying beautiful act of creating something and releasing it into the world. The proposal. Spring arrived, bringing with it flowers and warmth and the sense that everything was beginning again. Natalie's company had just closed a major deal with school districts across the country, expanding their reach to millions of students. Vincent's novel had found a small but passionate publisher who believed in literary fiction and understood that some books were meant to matter rather than simply sell. They went to Mirror Lake on a Saturday afternoon, the same dock where Natalie had received her first heartbreak and made her first real promise to herself. The water was calm, reflecting the sky like glass. They sat side by side, shoulders touching, watching ducks glide across the surface. "I have been thinking about promises," Vincent said quietly. "About the ones we make to ourselves and the ones we make to other people. About which ones matter and which ones we outgrow." "What brought this on?" Natalie asked, though something in her chest tightened with anticipation. 12 years ago, I made a promise to keep you safe by pushing you away. I told myself it was the right thing, the ethical thing. And maybe it was, for that moment. You needed to grow and discover who you were without me shadowing that process. But that promise has an expiration date, Natalie. It expired the moment you walked back into my life as the extraordinary woman you became." He shifted, reaching into his jacket pocket. When his hand emerged, it held a small box, simple and worn, the kind of thing bought carefully on a teacher's salary. He opened it to reveal a ring, a single stone set in silver, modest and beautiful. "I am 44 years old," Vincent continued, his voice steady despite the emotion Natalie could see in his eyes. "I teach night classes. I drive a car that makes concerning noises. I just finished a novel that will probably sell a few thousand copies at most. I am not wealthy or powerful or impressive by conventional standards. But I love you with everything I am. I love your courage and your kindness and the way you turned heartbreak into creation. I love that you see value in things that matter rather than things that shine. I love who I become when I am with you." Tears were streaming down Natalie's face now, but she made no move to wipe them away. Vincent took her hand, his own shaking slightly. "Natalie Harper, will you marry me? Will you let me spend the rest of my life trying to be worthy of the gift you have given me by choosing me?" "Yes," she said, the word coming out as half laugh, half sob. "Yes, 1,000 times yes. And Vincent, you are already worthy. You have always been worthy. You taught me that worth has nothing to do with money or status. It has everything to do with how you treat people, how you inspire them, how you show up with integrity even when it is difficult. You are the most worthy person I know." He slipped the ring onto her finger, and they held each other on that dock where their story had really begun, where a 17-year-old girl had made a promise that led her here, to this moment, to this man, to this future that felt both impossible and inevitable. The wedding. They married in late summer at a small ceremony beside Mirror Lake. The guest list was intimate, people who actually mattered rather than people who should be impressed. Rachel stood as maid of honor, crying openly and without shame. Vincent's brother flew in from Seattle, pleased to see him genuinely happy for the first time in years. Former students from both their teaching careers attended, evidence of the lives they had touched. Natalie wore a simple white dress that moved like water, her hair loose around her shoulders. Vincent wore a new suit, still modest but chosen with care, a gift from Natalie that he accepted after she convinced him that letting her do something nice was not a surrender of his pride. They wrote their own vows, promising not perfection but persistence, not ease but honesty, not fairy tale endings but real partnership through whatever came. When Vincent kissed his bride, the small crowd erupted in applause. But Natalie heard none of it. She was 17 again, sitting on a dock, writing promises in a journal. She was 29, walking into a gala and seeing the man who had shaped her understanding of worth. She was 30, standing beside the person who taught her that the best love stories are not about perfection but about choosing someone and being chosen in return. The life they built. They bought a house together, something between Natalie's penthouse and Vincent's small apartment, a place with room for both her technology and his books. Natalie stepped back from the daily operations of her company, hiring people she trusted and focusing on the creative work that had drawn her to education in the first place. Vincent's novel found its audience slowly, through word of mouth and book club recommendations, the kind of success that mattered more than bestseller lists. He continued teaching his night classes because the work mattered to him. She continued developing educational software because helping students still felt like the most important thing she could do. They supported each other's dreams without requiring those dreams to look identical. They disagreed sometimes, about money and risk and how to spend their limited time. But they had learned to communicate, to listen, to remember that loving someone meant honoring who they actually were rather than who you wanted them to be. On quiet evenings, they would sit together on their back porch, watching the sun set over the city. Sometimes they talked about everything. Sometimes they sat in comfortable silence, the kind that only comes when two people know each other deeply enough that words become optional. "Do you ever regret it?" Vincent asked one evening, his hand finding hers in the gathering darkness. "Choosing this life, choosing me, when you could have had something easier?" Natalie squeezed his hand, thinking about the girl she had been and the woman she had become, about promises kept and hearts that learned to risk themselves again. "Not for one single moment," she said. "This is exactly where I was always meant to be." And it was true. Some love stories take 12 years and heartbreak and growth and courage. Some require you to become who you were meant to be before you can find your way to the person who sees you completely. Some are worth every difficult moment because they lead you home. Their story was all of these things. And it was, in the end, exactly right. The end.